Good morning, friends. Good afternoon, friends. Thanks for coming back and joining us once again for another day of education on this fine Monday. Hope you all are doing well. It is my pleasure to introduce fellow Scumbassador Chris Bejarano today. He's checking in from beautiful Colorado. So please let us know where you're checking in from, and we'll see you soon. Take it away, Chris. It's all yours.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on where you're at across the world. Chris Bejarano here, Scumbassador, with my good friend Cole, coming to you live from Grand Junction, Colorado, Bejarano's Barbershop. We're going to be working, probably going kind of classic, old school style today. We're going to do something back to the basics, I guess we call it. I'm going to do just a classic slick back on my buddy Cole here. Again, as you guys know, I'm always a big fan of big consultation stuff. Always got to do a good consultation every time we start a haircut. For me, I've been cutting Cole's hair now for a little bit, so I'm pretty used to how his hair is, how he styles his hair. All of these things are always big factors when you want to do a haircut with somebody. Again, to me, consultation is where we go awry with a haircut, when somebody's not really giving you good information on a haircut, or we're not listening good. That's typically when a bad haircut ends up happening. So again, like I said, I just wanted to break it down to the basics. First things first, what we're gonna do with this classic slick back. Cole came in with a hat today, which is totally cool because that also gives me an opportunity to see kind of how he's wearing his hair. He came in with the hat, so it's got a little bit of a hat head thing, but we have a trick with our Reuzel products that we can do in order to eliminate that hat head thing. So let's get right to this. As always, we're starting with a little bit of the hair tonic. What that hair tonic does is going to kind of reinvigorate the hair. We're going to add it into our water bottle here. I'll kind of show you guys a little bit of how I mix my mixture, because that's always a big question we get, is what does the mixture look like? So clear water here, get my hair tonic. I usually give it a good ounce or so, I'd say, until at least you see, I don't know if you guys will be able to pick that up in the camera, but at least a little bit of a blue tint to your water. That's going to ensure that we got enough hair tonic in there to do what we need it to do. Now, the beauty of this hair tonic is it also acts as a humectant in the hair. Being where we're at in Western Colorado now, we're approaching 103 degrees today. So anything we can do to stay a little bit cooler and keep more moisture content in the hair, it's going to be worth it for us. So now what I'm going to do is just apply fairly generously the water to his hair, because I want his hair to be fairly saturated for this slick back. What it's also going to do, it's going to help us keep our sectioning and parting sections together. Also, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced using this Reuzel hair tonic before, but it's a great way to sort of break the ice or a conversation starter, because it has that awesome fragrance to it. And more often than not, once you start spraying this in the hair, people say, hey, wait a minute, that's not just regular water. What is that? And that's when we get the opportunity to say, hey, you know, this is our Reuzel magic water that makes our haircuts come out that much better. So now, as you can see, I kind of saturated pretty thoroughly. I mean, we're not to the point where he's got water dripping down his face, because obviously we don't want that. We want to keep this nice and tidy. But he does have good moisture content in his hair now. And then also what we've done is we've eliminated a bit of that hat head that he came in with. So again, like I said, we're just going to be doing a classic slick back. This is going to be very kind of classic Reuzel style cutting. If you're familiar with our baseline system, how we start from the baseline, make our sections and parting subsequently through there. So then this is just going to be, like I said, back to basics, really simple, but always a classic haircut. So see here, I'm going to try to get us in position where you can see my partings and how I find that baseline and put it in. typically the baseline starts around the parietal ridge of the head. And where that parietal ridge sits is somewhere close to right in here, like where the corners of the forehead meet the head. This is the parietal ridge area. This is also a trouble zone for a lot of guys because a lot of guys grow really heavy in these areas. So at times you'll find where, if we take this area too short on the parietal ridge, it's going to get jumpy and stick out, and it's going to force that problem when we're trying to keep this classic slick back look. So in order to kind of make sure that we don't go too short too fast in this area, we cut from that baseline system, which is actually going to preserve some of our length in these areas that we need. So what does that baseline look like in a parting? I will show you. Now we come right above the center part of the ear. The parting makes its way towards the back, and we're actually going to go just a little bit past center mid of the back of the head, and I'll show you what that looks like as I get this parting put in. Now again, having that moisture content in his hair is going to help me tremendously in keeping this parting and keeping it nice and tight and clean. When we work with tight, clean partings, we end up with tight, clean haircuts. That's sort of the whole philosophy behind this. Give another little spritz. Now again, for those of you who are familiar with the baseline cutting or how we've cut in the past through our baseline, this is super familiar to you guys. You'll see that parting stays parallel with the head, follows the natural bias of the head, comes down just a little bit past center mid of the back of the head here. And what that's going to do is ensure that we don't go too high too fast. Trouble zones again for a guy are always the cowlick area, especially in the crown. So what I'm trying to do here is preserve some of that length so that we don't get too jumpy. Again, it kind of defeats that purpose of that classic slick back that we're looking for. So now that I got my parting put in, I'm feeling pretty confident how crispy clean that parting is. So now what I'm going to do is take my first section, which is above the ear. This is the flattest part of the head. When we're working with men's shapes and styles, we always kind of want to honor that masculine sort of squareness to the shape, and that's what we're trying to do with this haircut. Is even though it's a slick back, it's going to be a little bit lower of a taper. We still want to maintain some of that square masculineness to the look of the haircut. So I'm starting above the ear. I'm going to pull down my first section. I will cut that section, and I'll use that section almost as a traveling guide to go back through my baseline parting. I'm always going to keep parallel with that baseline parting each subsequent section that I'm cutting and pulling. And we're just basically going to move in a very systematic way, cutting from that top section of the baseline, working our way back down. We're going to move back down to the second subsequent section and just keep repeating this step basically until we run out of hair. I tend to leave a little bit of the perimeter length longer, and I will go back through with my clippers and detail that work in once I get a little bit closer through with the shears. So, all right, here we go, guys. First cut. We're going to pull as much of this hair from below as we can. It makes a cleaner, tighter taper once we get down there. I'm keeping my comb and my fingers and everything parallel with that section that I'm pulling. And I'm really working in a very straight, square kind of manner. I'm keeping my shoulders in that same position. I'm going to take my first cut, which you guys won't be able to see that, but I'm cutting about, I'd say close to a strong 1.25 inches off. And basically, I'm going to take that traveling guide that I just created from that base parting and work all the way back, cutting that hair until I get back towards the center mid. I've come all the way back now towards center mid. Kind of see those areas that I pulled up. Basically, what I do from there is I comb this back down. into shape, maintaining my same baseline parting, and I'm just going to move right back down to the subsequent section and repeat the steps. Now this is a very, I say, systematic way to cut hair, but the best part about being systematic is consistent. And as we all know as professionals, the more consistent we can be, the more money we're going to make, as a matter of fact. How that translates is you're kicking out a good haircut every single time. The people know you work systematically, you get good haircuts, you know? Moving back down to that next section, I'm probably only going to get about 3 sections out of this with shears before I move into my clipper work. I'm working behind the ear now, pulling each section down to it. Now what's kind of funny with cutting this way is your guide will typically pop out from below your comb. So when I'm pulling this section down, what I'm looking for is the piece that I cut on the top half, if this is making sense. It's going to come out from the top of my comb, I'm sorry, the bottom of the comb. It's just kind of opposite of how you would think when you're working with that baseline cutting. Okay, so basically what I've done now is I've taken 1.25 inches from all the way around. You guys might notice, if I can get the right angle here, already just taking that little 1.25 inches off, it's getting a little jumpy. So I know now that I don't want to take any more hair or cut any more hair from that length, because I don't want it to get any more jumpy. It's got it right about where I want to lay it, especially with a little bit of product, it's going to lay just fine. So now what I'm going to do, in order to make this haircut have some continuity to it and not be disconnected in any such way, I'm going to take this baseline, I'm going to move it up probably about 1 inch or so up into the length of the hair. I'm going to pull some of this length down into this original baseline that I cut here. I'm not going to take too much out, but again, in order to have that continuity and that flow, that classic Reuzel slick back, we got to cut some of this hair, the length, into some of this length on the side, the baseline. And that's what's going to give us that real slick, kind of contoured look that we're looking for. So again, we're going to reapply water. It is hot here, and Cole's hair is thirsty. So re-wetting, reapplying water. Boom, I'm basically going to move right back up to that section and pull down some of that length into that original baseline section that I just created. And once we get this parting, I'll show you guys exactly how much hair I will be cutting. Now I don't want to go too high into this length because I want to preserve as much of this top length as I can without getting into it too far. If I keep going up with my sections here, eventually I'm going to be taking all this length out and taking this length to this length, which I don't want to do. You know, we want the sides a little shorter, but we want to maintain some of that length up top. So now I've got that section put in. You can see real clean baseline. You can see, or you can coming back just over center mid of the head. And again, starting right above that ear, basically I call that square one. That's always where I'm going to be combing my hair back to, is that square one just above the ear where we initially made our first cut with the baseline. So you guys won't be able to see this on camera, but I'm again coming up, I'm pulling straight out. My guide is poking out from the bottom of the hair that I'm about to cut, and that's what I'm going to match my length to, just like so. And this time I'm cutting a little bit more than the 1.25 inches. I'm probably cutting more close to like 1.5 inches at this point. But again, that's because I moved some of this top length down into this baseline. So it's going to be just a bit longer. Working my way towards the back of the head, just past center mid. And I'll show you a good reason why I like to work past center mid I mentioned it earlier, just kind of touched on it, but it leaves a bit of this bulk in this crown area. And that to me is what I call the backdoor plan. That's if stuff gets kind of hectic and crazy, at least you know you got an escape route. If this starts to get jumpy, if we leave this length long, we have that backdoor plan, that escape route where we can kind of work with this length to get everything to lay down. If we cut this too short, too quick, we've cut off our escape route. We got no backdoor plan. Now it's just lather it down with pomade to get it to stay down. So that's just a little trick that I like to use in order to preserve some of that length around the crown. All right, guys, so now I've taken that section down. Like I said, came down about an inch from this parting. I don't think I want to go any more because I do want to keep the majority of this top length that he has going on up here. He's working with probably close to, I'd say 7 inches at least up top. So if I keep pulling this section up, I'm going to run out of that length. So what I'm going to do now is basically take a baseline parting on the opposite side and mirror the work that I just created on this side. I'm going to mirror that on the right side of his head. And then again, like I said, working systematically, we're just going to push through this haircut. And working in that systematic way, we'll have consistency on both ends. This little crown area that I'm showing you, working past center mid, once we get this side done, you'll really be able to see this exaggerated weight and length in that crown area that I was talking about. But I want you guys to see that because that'll kind of show you where you need to be. And it's also sort of a telltale sign that you've done this correctly on both sides and that you've basically made it symmetrical on both sides. You'll get this little tail end here, and that's sort of your telltale sign that you did it right. Again, just a little saturation through the hair. Makes it really easy to keep our partings. And we're just going to move over here to this side. Combing in the baseline. And how's everybody doing out there in the world? It seems quiet. Did everybody get their coffee this morning? All right, get the baseline put in. This is the initial baseline to make that initial cut. I always have questions with classes when people always ask, how do I remember how much to cut on this side versus like how much I cut on the other side? And that's where I would say, you know, that's up to us as the professional. I remembered in my head, it was about 1.25 inches. Sometimes we have different ideas of what inch increments are, but if you can always refer to a comb for your inch increments, or you can always kind of count like how many teeth you're going through when you're pulling out that length, just sort of a frame of reference so you know how much length. In my head, I know it's about 1.25 inches. So having a background in construction, I know what 1.25 inches looks like. That's always just a question I get. You know, how do we make sure that we're taking the same amount off here as we did here? And that's sort of what's left up to us as the professionals to remember that. So I'm going to kind of fly through this side just because we already know what we're doing here. I'm pulling up, keeping my body square with the parting section, pulling out. There goes my 1.25 inches. I'm just going to follow this section all the way back to the center mid of the head, then work subsequently down. Now, one thing that this slick back haircut, it works really well with Cole's hair. Again, like I said, I've been cutting his hair now for a couple of years. He's actually been a Reuzel model for me once before as well. But being that he wears this slick back, styled pretty much like it is all the time, his hair really just falls into that slick back shape, which makes it really easy to come in and get his hair cut and get it put back into shape. Again, like something I mentioned before with consultations, you know, sometimes guys' hair won't do what they want it to do, even though they want that look and that style of haircut. Sometimes no matter how much pomade or act of God we put into it, it's not going to do what we want it to do. And in that case, that's where, you know, we as a professional need to sort of consult them and let them know, hey, I know you want to look like Brad Pitt, but this haircut just ain't for you, man. Take out probably one more in here before I move on to the next section up top. Now, one thing I want to show you guys again, another little tip and trick to doing these slick backs. So I've taken this section above the ear and I pulled it straight out just like we usually do. But one thing I haven't really done, and I'll kind of exaggerate this a bit, is I've left a bit of this front length here in the front perimeter. I've not cut that length short into this length here, like with the baseline. I've sort of left it long. And what I like to do with this front section of hair is just over direct it slightly back to that ear, above the ear, that original baseline section. And what that does is as we pull this back, we know that when we're doing over direction, we take length, distance equals length. So the further we pull something back from its original growth line, we're going to preserve that length. This is really important for that slick back kind of a look, because when we're looking at somebody's haircut, the first thing we're seeing is the sides and how that shape is kind of created versus a flat top or something like that. You know, the sides also kind of help create that look of the haircut. This length here, preserved to slick back, is in fact in the name, you know, the slick back haircut. So we really want to preserve some of that length up front to give us that slick back. So how I do this is I just over direct this back into that original baseline section. You can almost just leave it long too. You can almost leave this long this way and sort of cut in like a face frame fashion. We're just going to kind of go through and face frame it sort of. And then once you do that, you pull this back, you'll see how everything really just kind of lays back in there. I did the same thing on the other side. I just didn't demonstrate it as well as I did on this right side. So now that we've worked that baseline section, subsequently all the way down through, I'm going to go back up into that top length. I'm going to pull about an inch section down, and we're going to cut that top length into this baseline length. And then from then, I think I should be pretty good to move on with some of my cleanup and taper work that we'll be using with the clippers. And that to me is where this haircut really shines, is a nice low taper. Obviously, we got to give the best of both worlds here. We want Cole to have a nice clean haircut, something that's going to last him, you know, a couple weeks. And again, also that it's going to be, we're approaching over 100 this whole week here in Western Colorado. So any less hair we can have on him, I'm sure he'll be thrilled with that as well, so that he's not cooking. He does have a heavier texture to his hair. It is a little bit thicker. And so just like my hair, I'm sure it's like a wool blanket once it gets to this length. So again, you can see I'm combing down at least an inch from that top length down into our baseline. And I'm just going to repeat that step, working very square with my comb and my body. Here we go, we're losing 1.5 inches. I'm going to work this section all the way back through center mid. Once you start getting back towards this back where the hair is a little bit shorter already, you'll start to lose that guide. And that's fine, because we're getting to that point where we're losing a lot of that length, especially from this top length. So, got both baselines put in. I feel like they are both symmetrical. Both lengths on the sides are symmetrical. Now what we're going to go ahead and go through and do is do the taper work. Now this might vary from a lot of other Reuzel style cutting, and this is just my little way of doing things. Once I've got the top length and the sides cut how I like them, it's typically when I'll go back through and do the taper work. Again, what this does though is this baseline that I've created and brought all the way down, it gives me a guideline in the interior here of where I want to stop with my clipper work. If I keep working with my clipper work, I'm going to go against all that work that I just put in, and that initial foundation work that I put through. So that baseline being down low is going to give me sort of a stopping point to know that I don't want to go up too high. Now, what I do want to show you guys is sort of this heavy weighted area here that I've preserved from that top length. And like I said, this is sort of the telltale sign that you've done it right when you've got a little bit of this extra heavy weight in this area. And I'm trying to get you a good angle where you can see this initial bulk that's still back there. All right. With that demonstrated, we're going to fire up the old clippers, and we'll start in on this taper. I typically like to work clipper over comb with this. I don't like to work with guards when I'm at this point in the stage because, again, I feel like guards tend to be more of a crutch or more of like a bulk removing thing. So I feel like now I've sort of already removed the majority of that bulk on the sides. So now what I'm using my clippers for is more like finesse work. And anytime we're going clipper over comb, I'm using obviously a real classic clipper comb. This is a comb that we know for a fact, once we use it with a closed aught clipper, that we're actually going to get more of a true one. And also for clients or people in the shop, when they're watching you do this, this is also a really good way how to bill your haircuts as a classic kind of one-off haircut. You know, nobody else can get this haircut in the world because I'm kind of doing this a la carte sort of a thing. And so that's how it should sort of transfer to your client as well. When they see you doing the clipper over comb work, you're not just slapping on guards. It really kind of brings more of a value to what we're doing as barbers and stylists. So starting with the clipper, again, I'm going closed aught clipper comb. I'm going to start here in the nape of the neck. I'm going to work into that baseline section. We can see that it's really the baseline section starts, I'd say probably a couple inches below his occipital bone. Again, that's another kind of key thing that we got to watch out for. Some guys, present company included, myself, I have a larger occipital bone. So what ends up happening when we're trying to taper this area is if we got that too much weight on this occipital bone, the hair is going to protrude. The other thing that gets kind of tricky is if we try to make a taper across the middle of the occipital bone, the way that light hits this, it's always going to look like we have a heavy band or a heavy weighted line in that area because the sun's going to hit this area, or light, I should say, is going to hit this area and create sort of a shadow underneath here. So we're always going to end up looking like we have a heavy weighted area on that occipital bone. So again, it's just consultation, knowing your client's head, knowing your client's hair, seeing how it's going to work. For me personally, I know that his occipital bone is right where it should be. But what I'm going to try to do is keep this taper lower so that I don't get too high up into that occipital bone. And then again, we'll sort of lose that classic slick back kind of look if we go too high. So starting at the nape of the neck, closed aught, feeding the clipper in. A closed aught clipper with clipper over comb is always going to feed the hair in better. You'll get a much cleaner, crisper cut being that it's closed aught. So essentially, as you can see, I'm working my comb up. I'm keeping my comb very square and straight to the head. I'm not rolling out. If I roll my comb out, I'm going to create weight. If I roll it in, I'm going to create a short spot. So I'm always trying to work with my comb very parallel to the head and square. And what ends up happening is if I start down here at the nape of the neck, and as I'm working up, eventually I'm going to run out of hair. And that's going to create that sort of natural graduation with the hair, which in the industry we call the taper. So again, combing my hair down, I'm square. I'm really just working in that small square area. As you can see, I'm rolling up. I slowly run out of hair. That's going to be where my guide stops for the baseline that we originally created. And from then, I'm basically going to just move either side and sort of mirror what I do on one side, mirror on the other. Very systematic.
Hey, Chris, it's Franz.
Yeah, what's up?
Everything's good. Just wanted to check in with you and let you know you've got friends from all over the world tuning in today. South Africa, Netherlands, of course, Myanmar, Philippines, Brazil, Thailand, France, and then, of course, some friends from your home state of Colorado are checking in to say hello.
What up, peeps? Got people all over the world.
Absolutely. And if anyone has any questions, I can see them in the comments, and I will pass them off to along to Chris when we have a little break. So please feel free to check in, ask any questions you might have, and I will let you get back to it, Chris. Looking good, man.
Yeah, please. I mean, if you guys have questions, please feel free to fire them off. Like I said, I mean, you know, the way that I cut hair or the way that we do things is sometimes a little different than you might have seen. And that's just because each individual, especially all of us Scumbassadors, we all have our own little flair and style. And also we have our own little tips and tricks that we've figured out along the way. So sometimes, you know, again, there's never a dumb question. All questions are good questions, especially when it comes to cutting hair, because as my old math teacher used to say, this is only really reference for Colorado, but there's many roads to Colorado Springs, which I always thought was kind of funny. But the point is that there's no wrong answer or right answer. There's tons of answers, especially in the hair world. So please, if you got questions, shout them out. What I'm doing here is I'm creating essentially what this taper that I started back here. I'm almost using this length that I've created back here in this taper as my traveling guide forward, doing the clipper over comb. Again, I've got that baseline set already over this side, so I have that bumper, so to speak, so I know not to go high, or I know where to stop because I've created that baseline area already. But I'm basically kind of creating this taper by using this traveling guide back here for the taper, and then I've got that bumper from the baseline so I know not to go too high. And to me, this is kind of the best way to create that taper, is working with these systems, like I said. Now coming around the ear, again, here's a real tricky spot because, as I mentioned before on the other side, this forward length here on the perimeter of the hairline, I want to maintain that so that I get that classic slick back. If I comb this down and sort of go like I typically would with a clipper over comb, I might lose some of this length that I just want to keep and preserve. So what I do is I like to comb the hair into its full shape of that slick back, and then I'll sort of freehand around the ear. And what that does is, because I pulled that length back, I'm cutting around the ear. It's over directed around the ear, again preserving that length. So what does that look like? Closed knot going around the ear. I comb the hair back behind his ear, because that's typically what's going to happen with the length. As you can kind of see back there, I hope, I combed the length behind his ear, and then essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my clippers just as you would a pair of shears, and sort of freehand around the back of the ear. I'll do the same thing with my clippers. This time I'm going with the grain of the hair. If I were to go, if I were to go with the grain this way, the hair is not going to feed into the clippers so well. So what I do is I comb it behind the ear, and then essentially I'm going to go all the way open and I'm going to go around his ear, freeform around his ear against the grain, ensuring that the hair feeds into the clipper. I often have people tell me that they would prefer a shear cut because the clippers get it too short. Well, like I always tell people, you know, barbers make their living off of clippers, and a very wise man by the name of the Bloody Butcher once said, these are shears, they just move much, much faster than we can move our little hands. So I use these just like you would a shear. So now what we can see here is I've created this length, or this tapered length around the ear. I preserve this weight here and this length to give us that classic slick back. Now I need to mirror my work on the right side. I'm going to do it pretty quick again and knock it out. Getting basically what we're doing here is just removing all this bulk, getting all this stuff out of the way. Once I get my taper set the way I'm going to get it set, I am going to go back through and use blending shears, and I'm going to kind of blend in some of this weight line. There is still a bit of weight in these areas, but again, that's just there to preserve length. Once I go through and blow dry this a little bit and then come through with my blending shears, this is where we're going to really finesse and dial in the haircut and make it look 100% perfect. But for now, we're still in that removing bulk stage. So what I'm doing here is mirroring my taper onto the right side. Being that I've created that perfect guide, it goes pretty quick. Working real straight with my comb. Once we get this dialed in, you should see the classic look of a tapered slick back starting to form. But again, I'm using everything all clipper over comb. And again, like I said, what that does is even if a guy's never been to your chair before, he's never sat with you, and you pull out a move like this where you start doing everything clipper over comb, immediately they're going to feel like they're getting their best bang for their buck, because the last places they were going were just slapping guards on there and ripping through the hair, you know, almost just like another number. So with this clipper over comb, it's like added value. All the people down at TCR, they're watching and knowing, they know what a big fan I am of that clipper over comb. That's my thing. So again, it's just one of those tips and tricks that set you over the top. So working with that taper over the ear, freehanding around the front of the ear. Combing this down, open eye against the grain, freehanding around the back of the ear. Again, like I said, there's just a bit of that length up front. I can freeform face frame with a clipper. Now I've got both sides tapered. I'd say they're tapered probably about 80%, 85% to where I want them as my finished product. And again, what we'll go through back and do is go through with our blending shears, and we'll take that taper from an 85% finish to 99.999% finish. All right. So now I would say that we've got our overall foundation set. I'm going to go through and do a quick little blow dry. I'm not going to take 100% of the moisture out, but I'm going to take it probably about 75% dry so that I can do my blending work with it. Before I blow dry, the golden child. This is the Reuzel grooming tonic in spray form. I used to use the bottle. I still use the bottle a lot. I typically use this stuff when I want this to be more of a focused spray, meaning as opposed to just covering the entire hair with the product. Here in this case, I want to kind of focus where I want the product to be. So I use the spray pump in order to keep it a little bit more focused. And what I'm focusing on are, again, those trouble zones, those bridle ridge areas, or areas that might get jumpy, like the crown. I'm concentrating the spray in those areas so that I can help lay down the hair in a good foundation before I cut it. So now I'm using a vent brush. That's always what I use when I do blow drying, a vent brush. The reason I use a vent brush is because it doesn't manipulate the hair so much. It really allows the air to pass through the brush without me manipulating the hair so much. I always want to honor that natural fall of the hair and try not to make the hair do something that it doesn't want to do. Because again, here, we can manipulate the hair all we want, but if he can't recreate this look at home, he's going to be upset with me. So 2-3 minutes of blow drying here. Like I said, not going 100% dry, but close to like 75% dry. And the reason being is with blending shears, if we were to go wet, I'm going to be removing too much hair too fast with blending shears, just by design with those teeth and the hair being clumped together because it's wet. I'm going to remove too much hair too fast. So again, I want to go 75% dry. That way, I don't take too much hair too quick. So pardon the camera bump here, but I got to get my hair dryer out of here. Oop. Stay with me, folks. All right, we're there. So blow drying techniques. Again, I'm not going to manipulate the hair. I'm simply going to blow dry the hair into shape and just kind of coax it and guide it where I want it to be. Medium air, medium heat. I'm working close to the skin, so I don't want it to be too hot. Again, I'm really just trying to coax that hair into shape. And I'm not blow drying up. I'm not trying to create weight or volume. I'm simply just guiding the hair, and I'm letting the concentrator really do most of the blow dry work for me. We got one side, move to the other. Now, for those of you that are still paying attention and still remember, I still have this big bulk of weighted section back here on the crown that I have not cut yet, and I purposely waited to take that bulk down. I wanted to use my blending shear to cut the length out of that. Now, despite what people might think, a lot of times a blending shear works just as good, if not better, at taking length out than a straight shear, especially with somebody who has heavy textured hair like Cole has. All right, bam. Now I've got this dried out to, like I said, probably close to about 75% dry. What I'm going to go through and do now is use my blending shear to remove that bulk. Remove the bulk in the crown, and then also blend in the sides. And I'm going to take a bit of the length off the top. Now, prior to going live, Cole and I did have a conversation about length. We are going to try to preserve a lot of that length up top because his hair does need that length in order to lay down. So we're not going to be taking a whole lot of length off the top, but just a good cleanup to get him by for the next 6 weeks, which is typically when he comes through for haircuts. So now we can watch here, this bulk area that I just was talking about in the crown. I'm going to go through and use this 40 tooth blending shear to remove that. And I'm using it, the blending shear, as I would a straight shear. Essentially, I'm just cutting through the hair until I get a flat, straight cut. I don't know if I can show you guys here. You'll be able to see it. Once I make that cut with my straight shear, with my blended shear, it actually does become a very straight, square cut, just as a straight shear would. Woo, say that 10 times fast. You can see that length in the crown being removed, blending shear. I found this trick works very well with somebody, say, who has very, very fine hair as well. We all know that once you make those cuts sometimes and you're going through with the hair sectioning, once you're done with somebody who has very fine hair, you can go through and always sort of see your hatch marks with your scissors. So a good way to avoid those little hatch marks with your shears is to use a blending shear like a straight shear, and you won't get so much of those little hatch marks that you do with a straight shear. I've got that bulk taken out. We can see it's getting a little jumpy back here already. So I don't want to go too much shorter than that. But what I'm going to do now with my blending shear is blend through this little area, take that taper that I did, mix it in perfect with that original baseline cutting, and then we'll be on to blow drying and styling. So you're looking like we're coming up close on time. I should have just enough time to blend this through, remove some of that bulk. Especially with Cole's hair, you know, like I said, he's got that thicker textured hair, so any amount of bulk we can remove out of here is going to be beneficial for him in styling. A lot of guys will come in and they'll want their hair shortened, but they want to maintain a look like this, and I'll have to tell them, you know, hey, the length is what's creating that look, but sometimes it's just bulk that we need to remove. Not so much the length, but bulk that we need to remove.
Looking good, Chris. No major questions from any of our viewers, so they must just be enjoying what they're seeing here.
They're in awe.
Yes,
awe of Cole's hair, man, I'm telling you. There's some Scumbassadors out there that are jealous with this hair, I'm telling you. So what I'm doing essentially right now is I'm going through and I'm just removing that bulk I described, but I'm only really getting into 10% of the length of the overall hair. I don't want to get too far into the interior of the hair, because with the blending shear, it just creates more problems where the hairs sort of stand up and support the other hairs. So I'm really only getting into 10% of that length just to help create that softer, more confluent look to the hair. Alrighty, now we're going to do a final blow dry. Final blow dry is going to be 100% dry, and at which point, if we decide to put product in, we can. With the grooming tonic that's in it, should he not want to put any product in it, the grooming tonic's going to hold with just enough hold to last him all day anyway. So get this blow dried, and we will see a final shape take place. Maybe losing combs. And then we'll go through and do quick little detail work with the trimmers to set the haircut off right. feel like blow drying, we need like some standby music or something. Stand by, hair is getting perfect.
I'll work on that.
All right, so now, like I said, I'm 100% dry. We can see the shape of how the slick back's looking. I've got just enough time, it looks like, to do the little pretty touches I like to do. Another practice that I like to do with haircuts like this is sometimes before I go through and do the detail work, the trimmer work, I always like to make sure things are blow dried, either blow dried after or before you even put moisture content into the hair. This is just a little trick that helps ensure that you don't get so much hair all over your client. Especially in my world, we have tons of clientele who are business guys. You know, they come in off the street with their suits and ties because they're on their lunch break. So again, we want to send them out looking just as sharp as they came in. Just little tricks that I learned throughout my journey. Using a trimmer, I'm gonna outline his hairline, but I'm not gonna exaggerate the hairline. So I'm just gonna kind of accent it as opposed to creating a new one. And in the detail work, I found that it's all in the subtleties. The less hair you take out in the detail work, the cleaner it looks. This is especially the case when we're doing lineups in the front or something like that. There's a tendency to push the hairline back unnatural. With Reuzel, we always try to keep hairlines as natural as we can because au natural is much better. Freeform around the ear. Now, when we do this back of the neckline here, like I said, I try not to get too invasive into the rest of the hairline. I try and keep that hairline just as natural as I possibly can without over exaggerating it. So we're going to throw in just a little bit of product. We still need some detailing real quick. I found a long spot. Boom. Now what we're going to style with today is one of our heavy hitters. Our probably most favorite heavy popular product is the Reuzel Extreme Hold. I'm going to show you real quick how I apply it, as we are running out of time. And again, this product is going to be a great product, especially for somebody like Cole, who does have that thick, heavy texture to his hair. Got a good 2 knuckles worth, as we like to say. I'm going to put it in my palm and really emulsify it through my hand, like so. And then start, first I try to do those trouble zones. That parietal ridge area where we know it's going to get jumpy. Then I'll do the back, crown. But this is something I always demonstrate in front of the mirror with my clients so that they can see exactly how I'm applying the product. And what I do is basically instruct them, just as you would a shampoo, you work that product all the way through root to tip. We sort of loosely style with our fingers, ensuring that we get all the product through. And then the big tip and trick that I like to use is a pick. Because if we try to get a fine-tooth comb through this thick hair with that thick product, bad news bears. So I always reach for the sole pick. That's how we do it. I'm going to comb through the hair using the pick. What this also does is not pull his hair out, but it helps ensure that we're evenly distributing all of that product through his hair. Because again, there's nothing worse than seeing a good haircut, but if you see a pound of pomade just smashed into the hair, it's not doing the hair justice, it's not doing the product any justice. So go through, ensure that the product's distributed. Then I'll reach for my comb again and just comb through and ensure that I've got everything distributed correctly and that it's laying nice. And to that, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, this is a Reuzel Classic Slick Back Haircut, brought to you from Western Colorado, Grand Junction. Thanks again, everybody that tuned in today. We do these every Monday, so if you want education coming to you from the Scumbassador world, tune in every Monday live Facebook, man. We got some good talent out there. Probably some of the most talented barbers I know in the world participate on here, and I get to call them brother and sister of the smock. So again, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for Cole for being my fishbowl in the fishbowl, goldfish in the fishbowl. Bronze, if anybody else has any questions, fire them off. Otherwise, I think we're good to go, brother.
We are good to go. Thank you again, Chris, and thank you, Cole, very much. And big thanks to all of you for checking us out today. And yes, you'll see us again on Monday. Have a great week.
Peace out, everyone.